Don't tell me what to do!
How could you hide this from me? I can't believe you kept your illness a secret. I hate you.
The mountains felt heavier that morning, not because the sky was darker, not because the wind was stronger, but because something invisible had begun to weigh on everything. Jack woke up before dawn again, but this time, it wasn't determination that pulled him out of bed. It was discomfort, a dull pressure in his chest, not sharp, not unbearable, but persistent, like something quietly reminding him that his body wasn't what it used to be. He sat on the edge of the bed, breathing slowly, trying to steady himself. "Just tired," he whispered. That's what he had been telling himself, for days, maybe longer. He stood up carefully, stretching slightly, testing his strength. Still there, still able, still moving. That was enough. It had to be. Behind him, Tu Tien shifted slightly in her sleep. Jack turned back instinctively. For a moment, he hesitated. Then he forced a normal expression onto his face. He didn't want her to worry. Not now. Not when everything was finally going well. He stepped outside quietly. The early morning air was cold, brushing against his face like a wake-up call. The village was still asleep, but the unfinished community project stood in the distance, waiting, always waiting. Jack looked at it and felt something rise inside him. Responsibility, urgency, a need to keep going no matter what. By the time the sun rose, he was already working, lifting wood, carrying tools, giving instructions, moving faster than he should, pushing harder than he needed, ignoring every signal his body tried to send. "Jack!" Tu Tien's voice cut through the noise. He turned. She stood a few steps away, her expression already tense. "You started without breakfast again." He smiled lightly. "I'll eat later." "You said that yesterday." "I'll eat today." She walked closer. Her eyes scanned him, too carefully, too observantly. "You don't look well." Jack laughed softly. "I look fine." "No." She shook her head slightly. "You don't." He turned away, picking up another piece of wood, just tired. But as he lifted it, his hand trembled, just slightly, barely noticeable, except she saw it. "Jack." Her voice changed, lower, serious. He froze for a split second, then continued working. "I said I'm fine, but the lie didn't land this time." Tu Tien stepped forward quickly, grabbing his arm, forcing him to stop. "Look at me." He hesitated, then slowly turned. Their eyes met. And in that moment, everything he tried to hide was visible. The fatigue, the strain, the quiet pain. Her expression shifted from concern to fear. "What's going on?" she asked softly. Jack looked away. Nothing. That was the moment she knew. Something was wrong, and he wasn't telling her. "Jack." Her voice trembled slightly now. "Don't lie to me." He stayed silent. That silence was louder than any answer. She stepped back slightly, her heart racing. "Did you see the doctor?" No answer. Her breath caught. "You did." Jack exhaled slowly, still not looking at her. "What did he say?" Silence. "Jack." Now her voice broke. "Tell me." He closed his eyes briefly. Then finally, "It's nothing serious." She shook her head immediately. "That's not the truth." He looked at her now, frustration flickering beneath the surface. "I said I'm fine." "No, you're not." The words came out louder than she intended. The workers nearby paused slightly, glancing over. Jack noticed, and his expression hardened. "Not here." But she didn't stop. "You've been pushing yourself every day. You don't eat properly. You don't rest. And now you're hiding things from me?" Her voice cracked. Jack stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I'm handling it." "That's not how this works." Silence. The tension snapped. Jack's patience broke. "I don't have time to stop." The words hit like a shock. Tu Tien froze. "What?" He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. Do you see everything around us? He gestured toward the construction. The school, the projects, the people. They're depending on me. And I'm depending on you. Her voice cut through his, sharp, painful. Silence fell. Jack looked at her. Something shifted in his eyes, but not enough. I can't just walk away, he said, quieter now. I'm not asking you to walk away. Then what are you asking? She stepped closer, tears forming. I'm asking you to live. The words hung in the air, heavy. Jack didn't respond, because deep down, he knew. If he slowed down, everything might fall apart. But if he didn't, he might. And he didn't know which was worse. The wind picked up slightly, carrying dust across the ground. And between them, something fragile began to crack. The air between them didn't just feel tense anymore. It felt like it could shatter at any moment. Jack turned away first, not because he had nothing to say, but because he had too much. Too much pressure, too many expectations, too many people relying on him. And now, the one person he cared about most was standing in front of him, asking him to stop. I can't, he said quietly, not looking at her. I just can't. Tu Tien stood frozen. Those two words, simple but devastating. Why? She asked, her voice trembling. Why can't you? Jack turned back, frustration rising again. Because if I stop, everything stops. He gestured around. The projects, the help, the people, they're counting on me. And I'm not? She shouted. Silence. That question cut deeper than anything else. Jack's expression faltered, just for a moment. But he pushed through it. You are, he said. But this is bigger than just us. Tu Tien stared at him, her eyes filling with disbelief. Bigger than us? Her voice dropped, soft, broken. I thought we were everything to each other. Jack stepped closer, trying to explain. We are. Then why does it feel like I'm losing you? That sentence didn't just land, it sank, deep. Jack didn't answer immediately because he didn't have one. The truth was, she wasn't wrong. He was slipping away, not emotionally, but physically. And that scared him more than anything. I'm doing this for us too, he said finally. For our future. Tu Tien shook her head slowly. No. Tears rolled down her cheeks. You're doing this instead of us. The words hit. Hard. Jack clenched his fists. You don't understand. Then make me understand, she cried. He exhaled sharply, trying to stay calm, trying to hold on to control. If I stop now, his voice lowered, everything we've built could fall apart. She stepped closer, her voice softer now, but more intense. And if you don't stop, you might. Silence. That was the truth he had been avoiding. Jack looked away, his jaw tightened. I can handle it. No, you can't. Her voice was firm now, no hesitation. You're not invincible, Jack. He turned back sharply. I never said I was. Then why are you acting like it? The argument escalated. Faster, sharper, more dangerous. I'm doing what needs to be done. And I'm telling you what needs to be done is for you to rest. I don't have that luxury. You do if you want to stay alive. That line exploded between them. Everything stopped. The workers nearby had already gone quiet, watching, not daring to interfere. Jack's breathing became heavier, faster. Don't say that, he muttered. Then listen to me. She stepped closer again, desperate now. Please. But he shook his head, still resisting, still holding on to the idea that he had to keep going. I can't stop now, he repeated. And that was the moment something inside her broke. The fear, the helplessness, the love, all collided at once. And before he could react, she dropped to her knees. Right in front of him, the world froze. Tien, what are you doing? But she didn't stand up. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face, her hands trembling. I'm begging you. Her voice cracked completely. I'm begging you, Jack. The words hit him like a shock. I don't need a big house. I don't need money. I don't need anything you're trying to build. Her hands clenched tightly. I just need you. Silence. The wind stopped. The noise faded. Everything faded. Please, she whispered, just stay alive. That sentence didn't just break him, it shattered him. Jack's chest tightened, not from pain, but from emotion. He had faced business wars, betrayal, loss, but nothing had ever hit him like this. Seeing her like that, on her knees, crying, begging. For him, his legs moved before his mind could react. He dropped down in front of her, grabbing her shoulders. Hey, hey! His voice softened instantly, shaking slightly. Don't do this. But she shook her head, still crying. I'm scared. That was it. Not anger, not frustration, just fear. Pure, real fear. I'm so scared I'm going to lose you. Jack pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. I'm here, he whispered. I'm still here. But even as he said it, he knew that might not always be true. And that thought terrified him. They stayed like that, on the ground, holding each other. The world around them slowly returned. The wind, the voices, the distant sounds of life. But something had changed. Something deep. Jack closed his eyes. Tight. Okay, he whispered. Tu Tien froze slightly, pulling back, looking at him. What? He looked at her, really looked. I'll slow down. Her breath caught. I won't stop everything, he added softly, but I'll listen. Tears fell again, but this time, different. Relief. Promise? She asked. He hesitated, just for a second, then nodded. I promise. And this time, he meant it. She leaned into him again, holding him tightly, as if afraid he might disappear. Far away, hidden behind the trees, the same man watched silently, his expression calm, cold. Then slowly, he smiled. Because now, Jack had chosen something, and every choice had a weakness. Good, he murmured. Back in the village, Jack helped Tu Tien stand, still holding her hand. For the first time in a long time, he didn't look at the unfinished project. He looked at her and realized she was the only thing he couldn't afford to lose.
Hello mọi người, hôm nay mình sẽ trình bày câu chuyện về Toàn, một người đàn ông sống với những ký ức đã mất. Khi anh dần dần xây dựng cuộc sống của mình thông qua những công việc thường nhật giản dị và sự chăm sóc thầm lặng của những người xung quanh. Dưới ánh mắt theo dõi của một bà lão, Toàn đã bắt đầu thấy vững vàng trở lại. Dù câu hỏi về quá khứ vẫn tiếp tục làm anh trăn trở. Trung tâm của sự bối rối ấy là Tử Diễm, một cô gái trẻ tốt bụng và tận tâm. Người mà sự ấm áp, gần gũi của cô khơi gợi những tia sáng le lói của những ký ức bị lãng quên. Mặc dù anh không thể nhớ mình đã yêu cô ấy như thế nào, nhưng sự hiện diện của cô mang lại cho sự an ủi, hy vọng và khát khao lớn lao, muốn tìm lại cho con người mình trước đây. Qua công việc chung, những cuộc trò chuyện nhẹ nhàng, những khoảnh khắc bình dị, tràn đầy ấm áp, Toàn nhận ra rằng sự chữa lành không phải là lúc nào cũng đến từ việc nhớ lại mọi thứ cùng một lúc, mà đến từ việc sống và yêu thương, tin tưởng những người luôn ở bên cạnh anh khi anh thấy lạc lõng nhất.